Right, so I'm going to talk through the FoodOn ODK setup ontology development kit. It's one of these Foundry recommended software packages designed to run under Docker that will give you a configuration file and a one-line command or two lines to make, i.e. build all the parts of the ontology and into the final OWL products. And then it has some smarts in it, but then the other one is to actually publish that final version up to the web. You can see the FoodOn site now, the wiki page. Okay, so there's some notes here about how to build FoodOn, and I'll have to update these, but build via ODK is the latest. And I was showing how there's one full PDF document which talks about the workings of ODK. It's a few years old, but not too much has changed. But for kind of a tutorial walkthrough, the Obo Academy has put some money into creating this book, Semantic Engineering Training. It's got all sorts of great resources if you haven't been there before. But one of them is covering the ODK build under how-to guides. So on ODK, talking about setting that up. So it works within Docker to manage the ODK through one image that the ODK developers provide. And through that, you can run commands in whatever folder you are on in your computer. So I'll show that. So I won't dive into this too much, but um, just to say Docker desktop, when you install it on your Mac or PC, it's the same. And you will be instructed through those instructions to download an image by a suspicious kind of name, Agitated Zukov, Zukovsky. And yet this is bona fide. This is the somebody at Emble EBI who's created this image. When you have this image ready to go, then it means with just a little bit of configuration on the command line that you can actually go and run it in the FoodOn folder. So I will just go to this other part of the tutorial, which gets into the commands that you can run. So in the setup of ODK, and they just talk you through a little bit about how to load Docker and then get the ODK image. Not sure exactly where they mentioned that, but there's a bit of setup here that I've already done, so you won't even have to get into the technical details of that. I've already downloaded the ODK wrapper script and gone ahead and set up FoodOn with that. So and solved these memory issues around importing things into importing other ontology bits into FoodOn via ODK. So I'll just talk through what the setup is. So under GitHub, FoodOn. Right, so the FoodOn, this is an echo of the FoodOn folder pointing up, echoed on GitHub. The products that ODK are creating now are the FoodOn AL file, the full file, and the base file. And the base file is FoodOn stripped of all third-party ontology IDs. And that's used in um, some other projects on in the Obo Foundry, and therefore um, they're very particular about the way this is created. So as of last week, we now have a valid, good version of this FoodOn base. Okay, uh, these files, these three files, you can sort of see their dates are all the same, are produced when you're actually working in the source ontology folder. And uh, they are produced according to the configuration file right here, this foodon odk.yaml. So I'm going to open that. So the idea is ODK pays attention to this file in order to produce all the products. So this file is responsible for naming the ontology, providing a description that shows up in help documentation that it also auto-generates. It gives a little expectation of this OFN as being the main edit file. And for those who aren't familiar, OWL comes in a few different syntaxes, and OFN is the OWL functional notation. And so when you look at it in its source file, you're seeing these triples. And so that's slightly different from the FoodOn final product, which is produced by the Docker ODK. And I'll just highlight what I'm talking about here. So here's FoodOn. So this is the OWL RDF XML version, which lays the commands out in a little bit of a different way. They look a little bit more like HTML, and there's some issues there around expressing it this way sometimes. So it's usually easier if we're doing diffs and changing axioms to have it in the OWL functional notation this way. So just something to be mindful when you're working with ontologies in Protege. Protege can load both these formats directly, and it can save them and be very quiet about exactly what the syntax is that it's saving. But if you are in FoodOn, you will see when you go to save, file save as, you will see these options here. So usually when you're opening and closing Protege, RDF XML syntax is the one with the .al suffix. OWL functional syntax is the one we've been using, and it is actually the one that ODK likes to work with under the hood. But when it does its final production up to GitHub in that foodon.owl, it's actually in this RDF XML syntax. Okay, so that's a little bit of an expectation of what you get to see as these files are churning around on the server under ODK. Okay, I'm not meaning to dive into those details much, but right, so the export formats is OWL. There are tests that are done on the quality, and ODK has some of those set up so that when you do changes, some GitHub actions can be done on the server side. The documentation generator does a page or two of docs, and I believe those can be accessed somehow. I'm not sure if that part of this ODK is really used. All right, and then release artifact space in full. So those are two separate files. I think the full one ends up being back up to the root folder. So there's base and there's full. And then foodon.owl happens to look exactly the same size as foodon full. So I think these are just a duplicate. But the foodon base, yeah, I already said that's the one that has all of the third-party ontology ID stripped. Okay, so the real clincher that ODK can be helpful with, but also can be very problematic, is that it has a system for using robot, this other tool that's bundled in with ODK as a command line, which is great, done by James Overton and team, and it does all sorts of commands. But one of them is to actually be able to download an ontology, third-party ontology, extract a list of terms given by ID, extract a default set of attributes for those terms, and then import them into FoodOn or whichever ontology you're working on. So here's the list of ontologies that it's ready to import from, and its own import system will download the entire ontology all by itself for extracting the term. So it's doing all the work locally on your computer. And unfortunately, this tends to crash most people's computers. So, and the reason is, like Chebby is like 500 megabytes in size. And then by the time you get Java, the OWL API aspect of robot trying to open up this ontology and extract terms, the Java heap goes up to like 8 gigabytes or more. And that is what crashes people's computers. So what we've done is stick with the way FoodOn has been importing terms, which was through this simpler system called OntoFox. And OntoFox has been around as long as OntoB. So OntoB is the besides OLS, OntoB is the other place that you can look up terms. And they've created a database of all the terms, just like OLS. And in some respects, their database is better because it shows some other axioms for terms. This isn't a good example of that, but right, it shows, for example, other ontologies using the term and axioms that that are given with the term. Onto Fox. So this OntoB site is accessed at University of Michigan, an entire set of all the Obo Foundry ontologies and some others. OntoFox is their companion tool that allows you to put in from a given ontology, like Uberon. It allows you to specify terms. And I don't know if their lookup system is working right now, but you would be able to add a list of terms by ID and URI. And then it creates an import file out of those and creates an AL file when you actually submit this. So, for example, FoodOn right now, I can use their option to just provide the template. So I'm going to use option 2 to use an existing template from FoodOn for importing these terms from particular ontologies. So I'm going to go to FoodOn source, ontology, imports folder. And I'm showing you this script right now because I've implemented it in the new ODK. So there's some lines of code we'll just touch on there. The reason this is an important task to do is, for example, say one of our mini projects coming up at the hackathon is to start using Wikidata terms instead of gazetteer terms. So we would actually be changing the source and the list of countries codes that FoodOn uses from GAZ to Wikidata. So to do that is to work on the import part of FoodOn to go look at this other place to import those tags. So here we go. The imports folder has these different importations, and NCBI taxon terms is actually a really good one. So NCBI taxon, let's get this by name. NCBI taxon ontofox is the list of all the taxonomic IDs that FoodOn needs to have in a hierarchy. I'll show that file separately, but anyway, if I go get owl RDF output file based on this file on my local computer, it will go think for a while, and meanwhile I will go show you this folder. So source file imports NCBI taxon Fox. So it's a big long file. This is where we list off every single taxonomy that we want in FoodOn. So anytime we're adding a new species, we have to add and find an NCBI taxon term here. It's a massive database. Unfortunately, it doesn't have every species on the planet. It only has sequenced ones, sequenced in some way. So that's separate.
Hey, Damien.
Yep.
I just have to jump off to go to another call. Is there anything you need from me before I go?
Not particularly. I want to follow up with you about the MIFC to see if we can get a little progress on that. But
Okay.
we can do that later.
Okay, sounds good. See
Great.
you.
All right. Bye. Right. So this is a big long file, and it's a text file, and it just lists off all the IDs. And normally Ontofox returns the IDs, but I think this is not a good sign because this report is saying that it couldn't find all of these terms in Ontofox. And that is this is nicely exposing one weakness of this system, which is that Ontofox occasionally has problems loading terms. And this is I'm going to go to onto B because the underlying database hasn't successfully loaded them. Okay, but it is there. All right, so I was expecting this term to be missing from this database, but it isn't. NCBI is it's in NCBI, and therefore what's going on here is there's some typo in our import file. I did not expect that this would show up just now. I'm going to go take a peek at the import file to see if it's an easy one. What this usually indicates is that there's some misconfigured line on this file. Missing a hash mark or with some piece of text that doesn't quite match right. All of the latest changes are done up here at the top, and they all look normal. So I'm going to just try this once more. Okay, I'll come back and look at that problem later. Instead, I'm going to just choose a smaller file that should work for the purposes of illustration. So Cobb is imports from Cobb are a much smaller set. They should work. Let's see. Okay. There's something up with OntoFox. This file was working just fine as well, and it's not giving us most of the terms listed. So if I go to the output file, yeah, okay. Well, this output file is returning a number of terms, but not all of them. And so there's something suspicious going on here. But anyway, for the purposes of this tutorial, OntoFox returns the IDs from the given ontology, and it will return them in an OWL file format with all of the supporting classes for the annotation. So this is like a miniature ontology. So I'm going to download it here just to play around with. Just make a point. An irritating little thing when you're testing with these things is that when you save the page, the browser, at least Chrome, insists on putting the word XML on the end of it. But you have to rename it, and now can finally open with Protege. Look at it under the Classes tab, and this is the top level of Cobb. Okay, right, so it is all the Cobb terms. This actually does look like it's doing pretty well. And so you're getting just the Cobb terms, I guess, by ID. Go and vote Uberon cell. Okay, now we're getting a number of them. And so this import file, which I've just done manually, is just going to go down to FoodOn again. Yeah, in the case of Cobb here, I've submitted that file through the OntoFox service and got back this Cobb import.owl. That's the file we were just looking at in Protege. And that file is imported into FoodOn. So to figure out where all these imports are, they're never merged directly into FoodOn. They're always kept as these standalone files within the ontology system. The imports are listed in this ontology imports tab under the active ontology. So I guess I could have made the point earlier that FoodOn is this combination of classes that are edited directly in FoodOn. And if some element of a class has been edited by us in FoodOn and is sitting as a change in the main FoodOn edit file right here, then it actually shows up in bold. So for example, fin is a term that's in bold. So that means there's some aspect of that that has been curated, piece of information has been curated and kept in this FoodOn edit file, even though the import file for Uberon terms is actually included in an import file. We've layered on some extra thing, and so I'm looking here to see with my mouse hovering over each of these items, and I can see that fin has been imported in the general import file, the word fin and the definition, but we have actually added on a database cross-reference imported from tags within Protege, manually editing these and adding them to FoodOn edit. So this term here is actually coming from information about it's coming from two different sources, from this import file and from FoodOn edit. So that illustrates that in this general import file reference, if we go to the active ontology, look under ontology imports, here's a list of all of the import files in that folder. And there's going to be one called general import. It must be up top. Should be CDNO, COB, deprecated, FoodOn, gas, general. There it is, right here. So this is responsible for a number of those terms. And the build process, just to bring it back to the build process, the build process will actually go and automatically get the import files from OntoFox. We're using that system rather than the ODK's built-in system for getting them, because often the ODK one is just too big in its process and it crashes people's computers. And this way of using this OntoFox service is faster. And unfortunately, it's not necessarily more reliable. So circling all the way back to this configuration file, there are 4 import files that are managed by it: Chebby, Cobb, General, and NCBI Taxon. And they're all using these custom imports. And so we are actually doing the same thing with all 4 of these. We're bringing them in from OntoFox. And if all goes well, just mentioning these items and having the setup here will trigger for any change in the list of IDs, and this is all built into ODK, for any one of those, any one of these ontology sources, Kebi, Cobb, General, and NCBI Taxon, what it's doing in our script is if it's detecting a change in this list of, in this case, chemicals or Cobb terms, NCBI Taxon terms, or the general term, which is actually a list, because OntoFox can have several different ontologies mentioned at once. This is a list of several different ontologies and their terms to bring in to FoodOn. So it can pull them all together into one import file. If it detects a change anywhere in adding or deleting a reference, say I did not no longer needed seed split, and save the file, that's enough to trigger the rebuild of, in this case, the general file, and to actually go and trigger the regeneration of this file when I trigger the ODK build. So in short, I'll just go ahead and get to the command line and start to show this in action. So if I were to list where I'm at on the command line, I'm in the FoodOn source ontology folder. I've got ODK installed, Docker running, and what it shows is there's this run.sh shell file. This is the gateway to get Docker going. We do less. Let's see a bunch of commands, and it's doing whatever it needs to do to get Docker to be invoked to run this. So there's some things you need to do, like determine whether Docker is actually loaded on your computer. So typing in Docker after you do the ODK, Obo Academy instructions, that will show itself set up. but run. Then they get around to with a operational Docker and ODK system, you can type shell, run shell make, and it will start the process of rebuilding all of the files in the ontology. So it's going through various steps. It's actually doing a reasoning checks. It's got a bunch of loose or strict requirements based on what you've configured ODK to test. One of the stricter requirements is that no two ontologies can be, no two ontology classes can be shown to be equivalent. And so if there are problems there, it will report them back, and they're basically two reports to look at. So I'll take a peek at those. Here it's showing something that looks kind of scary, which is that there are 2,847 errors in FoodOn right now. And that's because, mainly because we imported the Siren database of food products into a class system years ago, and quite a number of those terms don't have definitions, and it does not like two things mainly. It doesn't like terms that don't have a definition or terms that have a duplicate definition. And we have some lingering problems cleaning that up, but none of that is essential to the operation of FoodOn. And so we're just slowly cleaning that up. There are more critical errors, such as that one where two classes might have the same axioms, and that's definitely a quality problem if that's the case. And so those things have to be cleaned up. I don't have time, I guess, today to sort of show how to work through solving one of those. But here's a successful build anyway, even though there were some like more cosmetic errors with the term definitions. And so going into the reports, unfortunately, ODK doesn't have a nice user interface. You just kind of have to know that there are two reports to check. This valid profile owl 2DL, that one is an important one. If that fails, then the build will fail. If you ever run into that one though, getting an error there and this equivalency thing, then I'm here to help, because that can be a little trickier to go through. So just going to bring up this report. So this report is an empty report. There's no problems with it. So the other report is that one that was spitting out all of those items here. And it's this one, FoodOn edit report. And this is the one that lists what are more cosmetic. Oops. Output here. This is the one we want to chip away at. The duplicate definitions are coming in mainly from our old Langwell import of these food additives. The missing labels and definitions. This is an error in the ODK itself. Most of these are not missing labels. I don't know why that query is not working for them. Anyway, you can see that the report's mainly composed of those things that we're not worrying about for now. So the result of doing a make in the folder is it's creating versions of the files that it would normally put into the root folder. So FoodOn full, foodon.owl, and FoodOn. Isn't the base one here? Yeah, FoodOn base. Those three products. That's all that the make does. And say I'd reviewed the files that it created and decided that they're good, they're fresh, they've taken in the new imports, changes, then the final command to get those files up to the root folder is like that. So make, prepare, release will actually redo the whole build, but instead of putting these files in this folder, it pops them up to the root folder. And I guess I'll just add one other detail to this build process, which is before getting into questions. And so that is that when you crack open the ontology here, it doesn't have a version code here. It has a date that is manually edited, and it has sort of this old ID here. But when you go to the published version, and so if I'm here in Protege, I'm looking up here, I occasionally have to check to see which file I'm actually showing. This right-hand FoodOn edit source ontology, this is the file you want to be editing manually if you're changing things directly in the FoodOn file. But the produced file is sitting up top in FoodOn. And when you open that one, you'll see that the latest version has this OWL version info, and that's something ODK is inserting into this file. And it's got today's date because I just made it. And that's good. It's also putting it over here into this ontology version IRI. So it's those two things that are important to systems like OLS and OntoB that are loading this up and showing the version dynamically. Some of those systems just comb for this FoodOn OWL file in the root folder of the GitHub repo, but others are actually looking for the release file. So, so looking at the code and the releases, some just pay attention to this release folder. So, sorry. So having upgraded to ODK, the last little detail is I have to make sure that the name of this is aligned with what we've got written in the version code there. And at the moment, I think we have this extra little character that's preventing some of the search engines from actually finding this or downloading it, because it's at a slightly different URL than the one specified in the OWL file itself. Okay, that's a bit of a crash course in the build process, assuming you have Docker installed and what the important files are, namely FoodOn edit, and then inside imports, whichever import files in the OWL format are referenced within the configuration file, and the fact that these four are handled via Ontofox, and that if you see any other import files in FoodOn, those are actually handled manually by, oh, right, I'll point one other thing out. So some of these other files that are listed here, such as the robot animals, robot dietary supplements, food process, meat cuts, plant parts, these are all built by us separately on the command line and not managed through ODK. So we do our own sort of quality control and build on these, and this FoodOn edit file's only role is to reference these import files, which are sitting in the import folder, mostly at the bottom under these robot areas. So a reference to these will bring that content into FoodOn, and this is regardless of what ODK is doing. So I guess the last point I just saw, which is that the FoodOn edit has these import files separate, but FoodOn, the live top level ontology, does not. And this is the top level one right here, foodon.owl. And you'll see it doesn't have any imports. And that's because they've all been blended right into the one file. It no longer has separate imports. All the classes include the other ontology imports. So if I go for fin here, that one term we were looking at, it's in bold, but there's no reference to import files now. So that's part of the ODK process, to blend in all of the imports into one file. Okay. That's the crash course in the FoodOn build, and we'll all have an opportunity to look over each other's shoulders doing that when we're in again, actually making changes to the OWL files here and there, adding new import files probably.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you so much for explaining this in detail. I haven't tried that yet, but just planning to give it a go next week, probably for installing the latest ODK when I'll be working on the remote scripts.
Right.
So yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Damien. I'm also wondering if you can send us this video. It would be great to have, like, for checking the details again.
You bet. You bet. I'll add it on YouTube. There's a whole pile of these FoodOn conference Zoom, and this will be added to that list.
Thanks,
So
Damien.
questions. Did I not cover something? I know I meandered a bit there, sorry. But is that a fairly comprehensive crash course?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Kind of. I will say that I have to try and then check the video again just to be sure.
Yeah, and you still have a memory. Mine is usually shot. I have to go back to that.
Yes, me too. And I have to do it by myself. It's like
Right. Okay. No need to stuff other stuff in then. Any other questions about that? No. Okay. Good.
Yeah, not yet. Probably if I'll run into any issues, then we'll definitely let you know.
Right, yeah. In fact,
Yeah.
there's one issue, for example. So here's I'll just share again. Share the whole screen. Looking at the FoodOn issues, there was actually one that was related to this. So which I think will be resolved now, which was a kind of a long-standing one. Where is it? Up here, base file requested. So we were using an old version of ODK, and it wasn't creating the base file. I think so. I think I can actually I think I can actually be a little stronger here and closing issue. So I get to finally say this.
And you don't usually have an audience
Yes.
cheering you on when you close out a request.
Yeah. This one was around for a while. Unfortunately, I didn't get to the ODK redo. And yeah. So look forward to, it sounds like we're gonna get back another curator soon who was on top of a few of these other issues, such as the milk question. So looking forward to that, but I won't say anything more until that's confirmed. Okay. All right. Then talk to y'all in 2 weeks.